She cried on camera. She begged for help. She told the world her husband had simply vanished. But behind those tear-filled eyes was a deadly secret, one hidden in a freezer, in her new lover's garage. This is True Crime Stories Arena, and if you crave real stories that twist deeper than fiction, hit that subscribe button, give us a like, and drop your theories in the comments below. Now, let's go back to where this nightmare began. February in Kentucky carries a quiet kind of cold. The kind that creeps in slow and lingers long after sunset. In the small town of Bardstown, people know their neighbors. They wave at passing trucks. They trust without asking too many questions. So, when 38-year-old David Carver didn't show up for his night shift at the local grain mill, people noticed. He wasn't the kind to call in sick. He wasn't the kind to disappear. The next morning, as the sun broke over frozen fields, Melissa Carver walked into the Nelson County Sheriff's office with red-rimmed eyes and trembling hands. "My husband didn't come home last night," she said. The deputy on duty filled out the paperwork. Another missing person report in a town that doesn't see many. Melissa described him in detail, his height, the color of his flannel shirt, the silver watch he always wore. "He left for work around 5, she said. "And he never came back." The report made its way to Detective Alan Merton by noon. By then, local news outlets had already picked it up. That same evening, standing in front of their two-story colonial with the porch light flickering behind her, Melissa pleaded through the cameras, "If anyone's seen David, please, bring my husband home." Her voice cracked just enough to sound raw. Her eyes darted back and forth as if searching the shadows for him. Neighbors started talking. "He's never done anything like this before," said one. "David's the most reliable guy I know." "I saw him 2 days ago," said another. "He was getting coffee at the gas station, joking around. Seemed fine. But no one had seen him since. Just gone. Vanished." As the days passed, the town did what small towns do best, came together. Church volunteers set up search parties. The high school gym hosted prayer vigils. A local bakery started a fundraiser selling "Find David" donuts, with proceeds going toward the search. Melissa was everywhere, at the front of every march, center of every interview. She spoke with quivering lips. She clutched a worn-out photo of David like it was the last piece of him she had left. "He's out there somewhere," she kept saying. "I can feel it." But as public sympathy grew, so did quiet suspicion. Detective Merton had been in law enforcement long enough to know that grief has no script, but faking it usually does. He reviewed Melissa's timeline. Something didn't sit right. According to her, David had left for work around 5:15 p.m. But there was no traffic camera footage of his car leaving their neighborhood. No co-workers had seen him clock in. And his cell phone, strangely, had been powered off just 20 minutes after he allegedly left home. When detectives asked Melissa what she was doing that evening, her answers felt foggy. She said she was home watching a Hallmark movie, alone. No one to verify. She mentioned taking a shower around 6:30, but couldn't remember what show she watched after. She mentioned doing laundry, but the machines were empty when police checked the next morning. Her emotions, once so raw in public, now felt oddly packaged in private. She cried when cameras rolled. But with detectives, her tone was clipped. Impatient. "I've already told you everything I know," she said. "You're wasting time when you should be looking for him." Still, the community remained on her side, for now. "She's been through so much," a local pastor said during Sunday service. "Let's not judge. Let's lift her up." But behind closed doors, detectives dug deeper. They learned David had a sizable life insurance policy, $500,000. And Melissa was the sole beneficiary. They also learned about a mysterious series of text messages David received in the weeks before his disappearance, messages that had since been deleted from his phone, but not from his cloud backup. "We can't keep living this lie," one message read. "If she finds out, read another." The sender? Unknown. The number? Untraceable. The meaning? Chilling. Detective Merton quietly noted it all. He'd worked cases like this before. The faces were different, the towns changed, but the pattern stayed the same. A man goes missing. A grieving spouse takes the spotlight. And in the shadows, the Real story begins to whisper. By the end of the week, no new leads had emerged. No sign of David's car. No sightings. No surveillance. Just silence. And behind that silence, something darker. Something no one in Bardstown was ready to say out loud. Was Melissa really the heartbroken wife? Or was she something else entirely? 5 days into the investigation, a single piece of surveillance footage changed everything. A neighbor's security camera, one of those doorbell models, captured David Carver returning home at exactly 6:13 p.m. the night before he was reported missing. He pulled into the driveway. Got out of his truck. Walked toward the front door. He never came back out. There were no other exits from the house. No backdoor camera. No garage. Just one visible entrance, and one silent night. Melissa had told detectives that David left later that evening, on foot, saying he needed to clear his head. But there was no proof of that. And now, this footage told a very different story. Detectives revisited the home. This time, they noticed what they'd missed before: David's truck, still parked in the driveway, covered by a tarp Melissa had placed there 2 days earlier. His wallet was in the glove compartment. His phone charger still plugged in by the nightstand. And the car keys? Sitting untouched in the kitchen drawer. Melissa's explanation shifted again. He must have gone for a walk, she said. Maybe to the park, or just to cool off. But there were no signs of a walk. No jacket missing. No credit card activity. And no phone activity after 6:31 p.m. In missing person cases, every minute matters. But in this one, every minute was vanishing, along with Melissa's credibility. On the 7th day, the tip line rang. The caller didn't give a name, just a voice, low and tense. Check out a guy named Bryce Jensen, they said. He and Melissa have been close. Real close. Long before this happened. Detectives ran the name. Bryce Jensen. 39. Local mechanic. Owned a repair shop out of his detached garage on the east side of town. No criminal record. Lived alone. Quiet, off-the-grid lifestyle. No social media. Not many friends. But one neighbor had plenty to say. Melissa's car, the neighbor told investigators. Used to see it there all the time. Daytime. Nighttime. Didn't seem like she was hiding it. Another neighbor mentioned something else, loud arguing, heard through thin winter walls. Melissa's voice. A man's voice. Not David's. Detectives initiated a quiet stakeout. Bryce's house sat at the end of a long gravel drive, partially hidden by trees. Each night, a familiar vehicle pulled in, a black SUV registered to Melissa Carver. 3 nights in a row. Melissa hadn't mentioned Bryce once, not in interviews, not in conversations, not in passing. When asked directly, she dismissed it. Bryce? He's just a friend. He's been helping me through this. But her tone betrayed her. Too rehearsed. Too controlled. Bryce, when questioned, was guarded. He admitted they'd been spending time together. Denied any wrongdoing. Claimed he hadn't seen David in weeks. Didn't even really know him, he said. Yet his story had holes. Phone records showed multiple late-night calls between him and Melissa the week David vanished. Texts, deleted but later recovered, told a different story. I can't keep lying for you. This is spiraling. You said it would be simple. They're going to figure it out. Now, detectives had a new theory, and a new suspect. Or maybe, 2. What started as a missing person case was beginning to feel like something else entirely. Premeditated. Personal. And possibly deadly. 17 days into the investigation, the tension finally cracked. Detectives had enough inconsistencies, enough gaps, enough suspicion. With a judge's signature, they executed a search warrant for Bryce Jensen's property. The focus, his garage. What they found behind that dented metal door would bring a small town to its knees. Detective Merton would later describe the moment in just 3 words: the smell hit. As officers stepped inside, the air grew thick. Acrid. Wrong. In the far corner of the garage sat a large, humming chest freezer, older model, scratched white surface, padlocked shut. They forced it open. And what they saw inside would end all speculation. A large black trash bag, tightly bound in duct tape, resting atop frozen tools and engine parts. The odor intensified as the frost cracked open. Inside the bag, a tarp. Inside the tarp, David Carver. His body frozen stiff. Hands bound. Mouth taped shut. The bruising on his wrists and neck told its own story, of struggle, of fear, of silence. David Carver hadn't just disappeared. He had been murdered. Wrapped. Sealed. Hidden in a mechanic's garage freezer. Just 3 miles from his home. For 17 days, Melissa Carver had cried on camera. She had lit candles, handed out flyers, prayed aloud on local news. All the while, her husband's body lay curled in a chest freezer like discarded meat, preserved in ice, like an inconvenient truth. News of the discovery moved fast. Within hours, Melissa Carver was in handcuffs. She was arrested at home, still in the same oversized sweatshirt she'd worn to a vigil the night before. No tears this time. No trembling hands. Just a blank stare as officers led her out her front door. Her neighbors watched in stunned silence. Some filmed on their phones. Others just turned away. Less than an hour later, Bryce Jensen was gone too, but not quietly. When deputies arrived at his garage, he was already on the move, his pickup speeding out the back alley, gravel spraying behind him. The chase didn't last long. State troopers intercepted him at a gas station 1 town over. He was trying to ditch the vehicle and board a Greyhound. He didn't make it past the parking lot. When they opened the truck door, he was clutching a duffel bag full of clothes, cash, and a passport. His arrest was messier, more desperate. Melissa's was quiet. But both mugshots told the same story. Bryce's face, hollow-eyed, jaw clenched. Melissa's stoic. Void. The mascara tears were gone now. All that remained was a hard, icy stillness. Within hours, the headlines exploded. Grieving wife turned killer. Husband found dead in freezer, wife and lover charged. Kentucky love triangle ends in murder. For a town like Bardstown, it was unthinkable. Melissa Carver, the woman who had once begged America to help her find her missing husband, was now the prime suspect in his murder. Bryce Jensen, the quiet mechanic no one paid attention to, had become her alleged accomplice. And David Carver, the steady, soft-spoken man who never missed a shift, had become just another cold case turned colder still. But this story wasn't over. Because beneath the murder, beneath the freezer, beneath the lies, was a deeper motive. One layered in secrets, silence, and betrayal. And it was about to surface. The deeper investigators dug, the more the case unraveled, not into chaos, but into a chilling clarity. A forensic sweep of Melissa Carver's phone uncovered hundreds of deleted text messages, most between her and Bryce Jensen. What began as flirty banter months ago had grown into something darker. Obsessive. Possessive. And sometimes, violent. They had been involved for 9 months. 9 months of stolen time, secret rendezvous, and promises whispered behind locked car doors and garage walls. One message from Melissa read, "I can't keep pretending. I go to bed beside him, but I'm thinking about you. Always you." Another. "He doesn't touch me. You make me feel alive. You're the only one who sees me." But then, the tone shifted. "He's in the way. I want you. Only you." And later. "You said we'd figure it out. I'm tired of waiting." The messages painted a picture not of love, but of fixation. A shared fantasy. A dangerous delusion fueled by secrecy and adrenaline. One in which David Carver wasn't just a husband. He was an obstacle. And obstacles, in their minds, had to be removed. The prosecution's timeline of the murder would later be laid out in court, piece by calculated piece. February 3rd. David Carver returns home just after 6 p.m., caught on surveillance. Inside the house, something isn't right. He confronts Melissa. Investigators believe he had grown suspicious of her late nights, the cold shoulder, the lies. Maybe he found the texts. Maybe he followed her. Maybe he already knew. What is known is this: there was an argument. Neighbors reported raised voices. A woman yelling. A door slamming. What David didn't know was that Bryce Jensen was already there. In the garage. Waiting. Forensic evidence would later confirm that David suffered blunt force trauma to the head, likely from a tire iron or a heavy wrench. He was then suffocated, no defensive wounds, suggesting the first blow knocked him unconscious. He died within minutes. Within an hour of arriving home, David Carver's body was wrapped in tarp, duct-taped, and placed inside a freezer Bryce had modified earlier that week. No blood. No weapon. No screams. Just silence. And planning. What followed was not panic. It was choreography. Melissa cleaned the house, methodically. Wiped down surfaces. Changed out the living room rug. Laundered a set of clothes that would later test positive for trace blood, despite being bleached. Then, she picked up the phone. She called David's best friend. "Hey, have you heard from him?" she asked. "He left last night after a fight. I'm worried." She repeated the same lines to her sister, her church group, and eventually, to a reporter standing in her front yard. "I don't know what happened. 1 minute he was here. Then he was gone. Please, just help me find him." The footage aired across the state. Melissa, wide-eyed, trembling, voice cracking. She even quoted scripture. Behind the camera, her hands were steady. Behind the walls, her husband was already dead. 3 miles away, Bryce played his part. Quiet. Unbothered. But online, he was preparing. Receipts show Bryce purchased industrial-grade freezer components days before the murder, insulation kits, sealant foam, and a backup generator. He even deleted his browsing history, but forensic tools recovered searches like: how long does a body stay preserved in a freezer? Can police detect freezer burn in autopsies? Chest freezer padlock installation. It wasn't a crime of passion. It was a plan. One built slowly, over months of secrecy, and executed in a single hour of irreversible decision. They didn't think they'd get caught. They thought the lie could live longer than the truth. That tears could mask guilt. That grief could become a costume. But they forgot one thing. The dead don't stay silent forever. And David Carver was finally being heard. The courtroom was packed. Reporters filled the benches. Locals lined the back wall. Family members sat stone-faced, clutching tissues, waiting for the truth, or something close to it. The prosecution called it premeditated, cold-blooded, and cowardly. Melissa Carver called it mistake. Bryce Jensen never took the stand. He didn't have to. Days before the trial began, he accepted a plea deal, second-degree murder, 50 years in prison. In exchange, he avoided the death penalty and agreed to testify against Melissa. His statement was simple. It was her idea. Melissa, however, wasn't going down quietly. She pleaded not guilty. Her defense was unexpected and polarizing. She painted herself as a victim. Not of circumstance. But of Bryce. She claimed he was controlling. That he manipulated her. Threatened her. That their affair had turned into a nightmare she couldn't escape. "I was afraid of him," she said, voice shaking. "He said he'd hurt me if I didn't go along with it. I never wanted David dead." But the prosecution had done their homework. They brought receipts. Literally. Thousands of text messages. Dozens of search records. Footage of Melissa laughing with Bryce just 2 days after David vanished. They replayed her tearful vigil interview on a courtroom screen. Then followed it with footage of her and Bryce walking hand in hand through a gas station, later that same night. The contrast hit hard. Melissa's defense began to crumble under the weight of her own words. One prosecutor said it plainly. She wasn't trapped. She was committed. To a lie. To a fantasy. And to the man who helped her erase her husband. By the end of cross-examination, Melissa's story had more holes than clarity. Her tears returned, but they no longer moved the jury. The jury deliberated for 7 hours. When they returned, the verdict was clear. Melissa Carver, guilty. Conspiracy to commit murder. Obstruction of justice. Not first-degree murder. But not innocent either. She was sentenced to 35 years to life. Bryce Jensen's earlier deal held. 50 years. No parole before 40. 2 people. 2 sentences. 1 frozen truth. In the weeks that followed, Melissa appealed to the media. She claimed injustice. Said she was misunderstood. Claimed she still loved David. But the public had moved on. David Carver's funeral had come and gone. His name etched into a headstone. His memory preserved not in a freezer, but in the grief of the people who truly knew him. Melissa's name, meanwhile, was reduced to a headline. A warning. They say every crime has a motive. Some are money. Some are power. This one. It was a fantasy. A fantasy where love justified murder, where lies outpaced truth, and where 2 people believed they could rewrite the ending. But real life isn't fiction. And justice doesn't freeze. Her tears were real. But they weren't for David. They were for herself. And the story she thought she could control. David Carver was a quiet man. A father of 2. A hardware store owner in a town where everyone knows your name. He spent most evenings fixing old tools and watching ball games with his kids. His life was simple and steady. But none of that mattered in the end. Because the woman he trusted most, the one he made a home with, was planning his end behind a soft smile and whispered lies. His only crime was loving the wrong woman. Melissa Carver was supposed to be his forever. Instead, she became the architect of his disappearance. And Bryce Jensen, her secret, her co-conspirator, was the shadow behind the garage door. A man who traded morality for lust. Logic for fantasy. Together, they tried to bury a husband, in silence, in snow, in steel. But the truth has a way of thawing. It took 17 days. 17 days of candlelight vigils, fake tears, press conferences, and carefully rehearsed lies. 17 days where David's body lay entombed in Bryce's garage freezer, his hands bound, his mouth taped, his story frozen in time. Justice came eventually. In a courtroom packed with witnesses, reporters, and ghosts of what could have been. Melissa in her orange jumpsuit. Bryce in shackles. David, in memory. This wasn't just a murder. It was a betrayal. A life discarded. A love corrupted. And for a small Kentucky town, it became a wound that may never fully heal. So, was this a case of manipulation? Or 2 cold-blooded lovers willing to kill for convenience? Tell us in the comments. And remember, real crime leaves real scars. Subscribe to True Crime Stories Arena for more cases that chill, shock, and haunt long after the screen goes dark.